The cosmological argument. The cosmological argument is a philosophical attempt to explain why anything exists at all. It starts with a simple premise. Everything that begins to exist must have a cause. Since the universe had a beginning, whether through the Big Bang or some other event, it too must have a cause. But that cause, by definition, can't be part of the universe. It must be something beyond time and space, an uncaused, necessary being that exists independently of everything else. There are two well-known versions of this argument. The classical version, developed by thinkers like Aristotle and Aquinas, focuses on the idea of contingency. Everything in the universe could have failed to exist, so something necessary must explain why anything exists at all. The Kalam version, popularized by Al-Ghazali and modern philosophers like William Lane Craig, emphasizes the beginning of the universe in time and argues that it must have a cause that itself was never caused. This leads to the idea of a timeless, spaceless origin, a cause that isn't physical, doesn't change, and wasn't created. Whether that cause is called God or something else, the cosmological argument forces us to ask, why is there something rather than nothing? The teleological argument. The teleological argument, also known as the argument from design, points to the apparent fine-tuning of the universe as evidence of intentional creation. It observes that the physical constants of the universe, like gravity, the strong nuclear force, or the rate of cosmic expansion, are set within incredibly narrow ranges. If any one of them were slightly different, life as we know it wouldn't be possible. The odds of such precise conditions happening by pure chance are so low that some philosophers and scientists argue it's more reasonable to believe that an intelligent designer, something beyond nature, intended the universe to be this way. This idea is supported by the anthropic principle, which points out that the universe seems strangely suited for the existence of observers like us. Rather than assuming this cosmic order is a lucky accident, the teleological argument suggests it's the product of a transcendent mind, a being that deliberately arranged the universe to allow for complexity, consciousness, and life itself. The ontological argument. The ontological argument takes a unique path. It tries to prove God's existence using pure logic alone, without relying on the physical world. It begins with a definition. God is that than which nothing greater can be conceived. Now, if such a being exists only in the mind and not in reality, then we can imagine something greater, a version of God that does exist, but that would contradict the definition. So the argument concludes that God must exist in reality as well. Philosopher Alvin Plantinga modernized this idea using modal logic, the logic of possibility. He argued that if it's even possible for a maximally great being to exist, then it must exist in some possible world. And if it exists in any possible world, then it exists in all possible worlds, ours included. Though the ontological argument remains one of the most debated, it forces a strange and fascinating question. Can something be reasoned into existence by definition alone? The moral argument. The moral argument begins with a simple observation. We act as if some things are truly right or wrong, regardless of opinion, culture, or convenience. This sense of objective moral values, like the belief that cruelty is wrong or justice is good, seems to go beyond personal or societal preferences. The argument claims that if these values are truly objective, they must be grounded in something beyond human minds, something absolute. That something is often identified as God, who serves as the source of moral law and obligation. Without such a foundation, morality becomes subjective, just a matter of taste or social agreement. But since most people intuitively believe that some actions are truly good or evil, the moral argument concludes that there must be a moral lawgiver. In other words, the very existence of right and wrong might point to a divine source behind them. The argument from consciousness. The argument from consciousness points to one of the biggest mysteries in philosophy and science. How can physical matter produce subjective experience? You can explain how neurons fire, or how the brain processes light, but that doesn't explain what it's like to see the color red or to feel sadness. These inner experiences, called qualia, seem to go beyond what materialism can account for. Supporters of this argument suggest that consciousness is not just a byproduct of physical processes, but something deeper. Since purely physical explanations fall short, the presence of conscious, thinking minds may be better explained by a non-physical source, a divine mind that grounds all other minds. This ties into the ancient mind-body problem, and the claim is bold, that consciousness itself might be evidence for the existence of God. The argument from reason. The argument from reason challenges the idea that our thoughts are just the outcome of blind chemical reactions in the brain. If naturalism is true, if everything, including our minds, is purely physical, then our beliefs are just the result of evolutionary survival, not necessarily truth. But that raises a problem. Why should we trust our reasoning if it's only geared toward survival, not accuracy? Thinkers like C.S. Lewis and Alvin Plantinga argue that our ability to use logic, reason, and abstract thinking suggests a different origin, These aren't just lucky evolutionary accidents. They point to something higher. If we rely on our minds to discover truth, that reliability must come from a rational source. In this view, our capacity for reason is best explained not by randomness, but by a rational mind behind the universe, possibly God. The argument from religious experience. Across history and cultures, millions of people have reported direct experiences of something they describe as divine: visions, voices, overwhelming peace, or a sense of connection to a higher reality. These experiences often lead to life-changing transformations and are surprisingly consistent across different backgrounds. The argument from religious experience suggests that, like with any other kind of experience, we should take these reports seriously, unless we have a strong reason not to. Philosophers like William James and Richard Swinburne argue that in everyday life, we accept others' testimonies as evidence, whether it's someone claiming to see a tree or feel pain. So why treat religious experience differently? If people reliably report encounters with the divine and there's no clear reason to dismiss them all as delusions, then these experiences may be legitimate evidence for the existence of God. It forms a cumulative case, one deeply rooted in human perception and consciousness. Pascal's wager. Blaise Pascal's wager takes a different approach. It's not about proving God's existence, but about considering the practical consequences of belief. Pascal argued that when faced with uncertainty about God's existence, believing in God is the safest bet. If God exists, and you believe, you gain eternal life, an infinite reward. But if God doesn't exist and you believe, the loss is minimal, just a bit of time or effort spent in religious practice. Critics argue that Pascal's wager isn't a proof of God's existence, but a rational strategy for belief based on the stakes involved. It turns the question of belief into a decision-making problem. Given the extreme potential gains versus minimal potential losses, it seems irrational not to believe in God, especially when you have nothing to lose. The argument from beauty. The argument from beauty suggests that our experience of beauty, whether in art, nature, or music, points to a transcendent source. There's something profound about how certain things move us emotionally or spiritually. The intricate patterns of a symphony, the grandeur of a mountain landscape, or the delicate brushstrokes of a painting seem to transcend mere biological explanation. Evolution may explain why we prefer certain patterns or features, but it doesn't fully account for the depth of our aesthetic appreciation. Philosophers like Richard Swinburne and Roger Scruton argue that these universal experiences of beauty make more sense when viewed through the lens of divine creation. If beauty exists in such a rich, overwhelming form across cultures and time, it suggests more than just random evolution. God, as the ultimate source of order, harmony, and meaning, is the best explanation for why beauty is so deeply woven into the fabric of our world. This argument is often employed in more poetic or philosophical discourse, drawing on our emotional and transcendent experiences rather than strict formal logic. Whether you believe or not, these arguments have shaped centuries of thought. So what do you think? Drop your take in the comments.